He chose his wife. And that is how I learned where I truly stood. I did not learn it all at once. It did not come with shouting or harsh words. It came slowly, quietly, like a chair being pulled away while you were still trying to sit. I remember the exact moment it first settled in my chest. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where I had fed my son every meal of his childhood, the same table where I once wiped his tears with the edge of my apron. He was talking. But he was not talking to me. His eyes were on his phone. His voice was soft, careful. The kind of careful voice a man uses when he does not want to upset someone. But that someone was not me. I sat there, hands folded, waiting for him to look up. He did not. That was the first time I felt invisible in my own son's life. I smiled anyway, because mothers learn to smile through many things. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself marriage changes people. I told myself love grows in new directions, and a mother must step back. But something inside me whispered a quiet truth. And that truth stayed with me long after that day. I had stood by him through everything, through his childhood sickness, through his failures, through the years when no one else believed in him. And yet, somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me. When my son was born, I was young and afraid. I did not have much, but I had love, and I had patience. His father worked long hours. Sometimes he worked so much that weeks felt like months. So it was mostly me and my boy. I learned the sound of his footsteps. I learned the way his breathing changed when he was sick. I learned how to stay awake all night and still smile in the morning. I packed his lunches. I washed his clothes. I waited up for him when he was late. When he was hurt, he ran to me. When he was proud, he showed me first. I was not perfect, but I was present. As the years passed, he grew taller, quieter, more distant like boys often do. And then he met her. I remember the first time he told me about his wife. His voice was bright, hopeful. She understands me, he said. I smiled and nodded. I wanted to be happy for him. A mother wants her child to be loved. When I met her, I tried my best. I cooked her favorite foods. I listened more than I spoke. I gave space where I felt unsure. She was polite, reserved, always careful with her words. I told myself that was just her nature. After the wedding, things changed slowly. So slowly that I blamed myself for noticing. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Decisions were made without me knowing. When I offered advice, it was brushed aside. Not rudely, just quietly ignored. Once I said, I was only trying to help. He replied, we've already decided. We. That word stayed with me. I began to feel like a guest in the life I once built. At family gatherings, he sat beside her. His body turned toward her. His attention followed her voice. I watched. I listened. I told myself this was normal. But at night, when the house was quiet, I sat alone and wondered when I stopped being someone he needed. I did not complain. I did not argue. I did not cry in front of him. I learned to hold my feelings the way older women do. Tightly. Quietly. I told myself love does not disappear. It only changes shape. But some nights, I felt like love had forgotten my name. After that first feeling settled in my chest, I tried to push it away. I told myself I was being sensitive. Age can do that to a woman, I thought. It makes memories louder and present moments quieter. So, I focused on my days. I woke early like I always had. The house still knew my footsteps. The floorboards still creaked in the same places. I kept his room just as it was, clean, simple, neat. Even though he no longer lived there, I could not bring myself to change it. His old books stayed on the shelf. His childhood photos stayed on the wall. I dusted them gently, like they were fragile pieces of my heart. Sometimes I stood at the doorway and remembered him running in after school, dropping his bag, asking what was for dinner. Those sounds lived in my mind now. The house itself had grown quiet. When he married, I thought this quiet would be temporary. I thought new routines would form, that visits would find their rhythm. But time passed. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into seasons. And still, the quiet stayed. I did not want to be the mother who calls too often. I did not want to interrupt his new life. So I waited for him to call me. Sometimes he did. But the calls were short. How are you, Ma?
I'm fine.
That's good. Silence followed. Then he would say he had to go. I would hold the phone a moment longer after the line went dead, just listening to the silence, as if his voice might come back. I never told him how lonely the house felt. I never told him how quiet dinners were. I did not want guilt to be the reason he visited. A mother does not want pity. She wants presence. When I visited his home, I made myself small. I arrived with gifts, food I cooked myself, things I thought they might like. I tried to stay out of the way. I washed dishes quietly. I asked before doing anything. Still, I felt like I was always in the wrong place. Once, I reached for a cup in the kitchen. She said softly,
Oh,
I usually keep those there. I smiled and said, Of course. But inside, something shifted. That kitchen was not mine. That house was not mine. And maybe, that life was not mine either. My son noticed, I think, but he said nothing. He would glance at me sometimes, then look away. That hurt more than words. I remembered when he used to run to me with scraped knees. Now he could not even meet my eyes when silence stood between us. At family gatherings, I sat a little farther away each time, at the edge of the table, near the corner of the room. I watched them talk and laugh. I watched him listen to her with a softness I had not seen in years. And I told myself again and again, this is what you wanted for him. Happiness. But happiness should not erase a mother. I began to feel like a chapter he had already finished reading. One evening, after a visit, I returned home and sat alone at my kitchen table. The same one I once shared with him. I placed 2 plates out of habit, then quietly removed one. I did not cry. I just sat there. And for the first time, I allowed myself to ask a painful question. When did I stop belonging? The distance did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, like dust settling on furniture you no longer use. At first, it was small things, little moments that were easy to ignore. Moments I told myself did not matter. Birthdays became simple messages, not visits. Not phone calls that lasted long enough to hear laughter in the background. Just words on a screen.
happy birthday, Ma. Hope you're well.
I would read them again and again, as if they might change. I told myself people are busy. Life moves fast now.
I did not want to sound old by saying that.
So I stayed quiet. When holidays came, I waited to be invited. Sometimes I was. Sometimes I was not. When I was invited, I arrived early. I always do. I carried food, even when they said not to. A mother feels safer when her hands are full. At the table, I listened more than I spoke. I laughed when others laughed. I nodded when stories were told.
But no one asked me anything.
Not how I was sleeping.
Not how my health was.
Not how the house felt without him. I felt invisible, like a piece of furniture that had always been there and no longer noticed. One afternoon, I tried to share a memory. Something small. Something warm. Do you remember when you were little? I said. And you? He smiled politely. Then she spoke over me. Oh, we're thinking of repainting the living room, she said. My words stopped in my mouth. They had nowhere to go. I swallowed them. That night, I lay awake replaying the moment, wondering if I had spoken too much, wondering if I had spoken at all. I began choosing my words carefully, then choosing silence instead. Phone calls grew fewer. When I called, I worried I was interrupting. Is this a bad time? Became my first question.
Most times it was.
I started marking days by small routines, watering plants, folding laundry slowly, cooking meals that lasted more than one day. The house echoed when I moved. Every sound felt louder than before. Once, I slipped in the bathroom. Nothing serious, just a bruise on my arm. I thought about calling him. I stood with the phone in my hand. Then I put it down. I told myself, he doesn't need to worry. But deep down, I wondered if he would even come. At a family gathering, someone asked him, "How's your mom doing?" He answered. "She's fine." I was standing right there.
Fine. Such a small word.
Such a heavy one. I wanted to say, "I'm not fine." But I smiled instead. That smile became my armor. I noticed changes in the way he spoke to me. Less warmth, more distance. Not unkind, just careful. As if he was choosing his words so they would not upset someone else. I understood that. I really did. Marriage changes a man. It should. But I did not expect it to make me feel like a problem. One day, she said gently, "You don't have to come over so often. We're trying to have our own space."
Her voice was calm, polite.
I nodded. Of course. I understood. But when I walked back to my car, my legs felt weak. I sat behind the wheel and stared ahead for a long time. I did not cry. Not then. I drove home slowly. The road felt longer than usual. That night, I looked around my living room. At the walls I had painted myself. At the curtains I had sewn. This house had held my sacrifices. My quiet strength. My long years of giving. And now it held my loneliness too. I began to realize something painful. I was no longer part of his daily life. I was an occasional thought. A responsibility remembered when convenient. Still, I told myself to be patient. To be kind. To be understanding. Because that is what mothers do. But patience does not stop the heart from aching. And understanding does not make the silence hurt less. I did not know then that something bigger was coming. Something that would finally make the distance impossible to ignore. Something that would show me, clearly, where I truly stood. The moment did not come with shouting. There was no fight. No harsh words thrown across a room. It came quietly. That is what made it hurt the most. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything shifted. The kind of day that feels slow and heavy. The sky was gray, and the air smelled like rain. He had invited me over.
Just me. No special reason, he said.
I wore a simple sweater and pressed my hair neatly. I wanted to look calm. I wanted to look easy to be around. When I arrived, the house felt different.
Too quiet.
Too careful. She was there, of course. Sitting at the table with her hands folded. Not angry.
Just distant that we sat together.
3 people at a table that suddenly felt too small. He cleared his throat. That sound still lives in my memory. "Mom," he said softly, "we need to talk about a few things." I nodded. I was ready to listen. He spoke slowly, like someone choosing each word with care. He said they needed boundaries. He said their life was busy. He said things had changed. I listened without interrupting. I always do. Then he said something that broke me in a way I did not expect. "Sometimes it feels like you're still holding on to the past," he said. "We're building something new now." Holding on to the past. I looked at my hands. They were folded in my lap. The same hands that had held him when he cried as a child. The same hands that had worked and cooked and cleaned and waited. I wanted to ask, how do I let go of a life I gave everything to? But I did not.
She spoke next. Her voice was calm.
Measured. "We think it might be better if you visit less," she said. "Just until things settle." Visit less. As if I were a guest. As if I had not been part of his life long before she arrived. I felt something sink inside me. Not anger. Not shock. Just understanding. I realized, in that moment, that he had already chosen. Not with cruelty. Not with hate. But with silence. He did not look at me when she spoke. He stared at the table. At the wood grain. At anything but my face. I waited for him to say something more. To soften it. To remind me I still mattered. He didn't. I smiled. The same smile I had learned to wear so well. "I understand," I said. And my voice did not shake. That surprised me. Inside, something was breaking. But on the outside, I was calm. We talked a little longer. About nothing important. About weather and errands. Then I stood up. I thanked them for being honest. He walked me to the door. He hugged me lightly. "Drive safe," he said. That was it. I walked to my car slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. When I closed the door and sat alone, the silence rushed in. It filled my chest. It pressed against my throat. I did not cry right away. I drove home through familiar streets that suddenly felt strange, as if I no longer belonged anywhere. When I reached my house, I sat in the driveway for a long time. The engine still running, the radio playing softly. Then I turned everything off. Inside, the house greeted me with stillness.
No voices.
No questions that I took off my shoes and placed them neatly by the door. Habit. In the kitchen, I poured myself a cup of tea. My hands were steady, too steady. I carried the cup to the table and sat down. The same table where I had once helped him with homework, where we had shared simple meals and quiet talks. That was when the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just slow, heavy. I cried for the years I gave without counting, for the sacrifices that were never meant to be remembered, yet still hoped to be seen. I cried because I realized something painful and clear. I was no longer needed, not in the way I once was. And maybe that is life. Children grow. They build new homes. But I was not ready for how small my place had become. That night, I did not sleep much. I lay awake listening to the clock tick. Each second felt like a reminder. Time moves forward, whether we are ready or not. I thought about all the times I had chosen him over myself, all the dreams I had quietly set aside. I did not regret them. Not truly. But I wish someone had noticed. By morning, something inside me had changed. Not bitterness. Not anger.
Clarity.
I understood where I stood now. And I knew I could no longer keep waiting for a place that was no longer mine. I did not know what healing would look like. I only knew it had to begin with me. The days after that Sunday felt very quiet.
Not empty, exactly.
Just still. I woke up each morning and listened to the house.
No footsteps.
No voices calling my name. At first, the silence felt heavy, like something pressing down on my chest. But slowly, I noticed something else. The silence was also space. For years, my days had been shaped around others. What they needed, where they were going, how they felt. Now, there was no one asking. And that was frightening. I made my coffee the same way every morning. Careful. Measured. I sat by the window and watched the light change. I realized I had spent most of my life looking outward. I had forgotten how to look inward. One afternoon, I found myself opening an old drawer. Inside were letters, photographs, small pieces of a life lived quietly.
There was a picture of me when I was young.
Before marriage, before responsibility became my whole world. I stared at that woman for a long time. She looked hopeful, a little unsure, but alive. "I forgot you," I whispered. That was the moment I understood something important. I had not only been forgotten by my son, I had forgotten myself. Healing did not come all at once. It came in small, gentle steps. I started taking walks in the morning. Slow walks. No destination. I noticed flowers I had passed for years without seeing. I listened to birds I had never stopped to hear. Some days, the sadness returned. It came without warning. A song. A memory.
A familiar smell.
When it did, I let it sit with me. I did not push it away. I told myself, it's okay to feel this. You earned these tears. One evening, I received a message from my son. Just a short one. "Hope you're doing okay." I stared at the screen for a long time. My finger hovered over the reply. I typed, "I'm doing fine. I hope you are too." And that was all. I did not explain. I did not reach for more. For the first time, I chose not to chase love. I chose to stand still. Weeks passed. Then months. I joined a small community group at the library. Nothing big. Just a few women mostly my age. We talked about books. About memories.
About life.
I laughed more than I expected. Not loud laughter. Soft, warm laughter that I realized I still had something to give. Not because someone needed me, but because I wanted to give. One afternoon, as I watered my plants, I felt something new.
Peace.
Not the kind that erases pain. The kind that lives beside it. I stopped measuring my worth by how often my phone rang. I stopped waiting for permission to exist. I began cooking meals just for myself. Simple meals. Comforting ones. I set the table nicely, even when I ate alone. I deserved that care. I spoke to myself more kindly. When old regrets tried to speak, I answered with understanding. You did the best you could with the love you had. And that was true. I thought often about my son, about the life he was building. I no longer felt the need to be at the center of it. I only hoped he was happy. One morning, I looked in the mirror and saw something different. Not youth, not excitement.
Strength.
Quiet strength. I had survived loving deeply. And I had survived being set aside. That realization gave me a sense of calm I had never known before. Life had not ended when my role changed. It had simply shifted. And I was finally learning how to stand in my own place. As the seasons changed, so did I. Not in a loud way. Not in a way anyone would point out. It happened quietly. I learned that life does not always give us the ending we imagined. Sometimes it gives us understanding instead. I used to believe that being needed was the same as being loved. I see now that love should never erase who we are. There are still days when I miss my son deeply. That kind of love does not disappear. It only changes its shape. I no longer wait by the phone. I no longer measure time by silence. When he calls, I answer with a calm heart. When he does not, I keep living. That is the balance I had to learn. I stopped telling myself that I failed. I stopped replaying every choice I made as a young wife, as a mother. I understand now that I gave my best years with care and intention. That was never a mistake. Some women are remembered loudly. Others are remembered quietly. And some, like me, learn to remember themselves. I sit at my table in the evenings, a cup of tea in my hands. The house is still quiet, but it no longer feels empty. It feels peaceful. I have learned that love does not always come back the way we hope, but dignity can stay, and self-respect can grow. If my son ever truly sees me again, I will welcome him with warmth, not with blame, not with bitterness. And if that day never comes, I will still be whole, because I finally understand something I wish I had learned sooner. I am not invisible. I was just looking for myself in the wrong places. And now, I see myself clearly.